Welcome to today's Television Guide Services 101 webinar. My name is Heidi Steffen. I will be your co-host today. I also have with me Chelsea.
Yep, I am Chelsea Stumpff, Broadcast Tools Product Manager. I'll be answering any of the questions that you might have during the presentation. There is a questions bar in the dashboard that you can ask questions throughout the presentation. I did just send a chat as well to everyone as a reminder. But if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation, feel free to reach out. We'll try to get to those. If we know we're covering it later on, we'll kind of wait on that and then bring it up to the group at that time as well. If we don't get to your question too, we'll make sure that we reach out to you directly after the call. Heidi, I'll let you take it away.
Yes, thank you. And this is being recorded, so everyone that has registered for this webinar today will get an email probably early next week that will have a link to the video, and then feel free to share it. And if you have questions throughout, you can either, like Chelsea said, put them in the questions or reach out to us after the webinar. So let's kick it off. First of all, I want to just do a little disclaimer here. The information presented in this is for general guidance, illustrative purposes only. This information is based on our tool services and some of the industry feedback that we've received over the years. Some of the information has been aggregated and may be incomplete or contain errors. So if you do notice anything that we have misinformed or have incorrect, please let us know. We'd like to keep our information up to date as other broadcasters reach out to us for information. The third-party references are examples, not endorsements, and for any specific needs that you might have, please consult directly either with TitanTV or the relevant provider. So with that, let's kick it off. Do you ever feel like this someday? Understanding the complexity of the guide data industry is very challenging, but there's solutions out there, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is some of the challenges, the solutions, and how TitanTV can help streamline the process. So of the complexity of the guide industry, why is it so complex? Some of the things really have to do with the guide data updates are not instant. So when you send it to them, it's not instantly updated. There's different systems that update things at different times, and even consumers may see the same information different on different platforms or different sources. So the question is, when you do find that guide that's incorrect or that source that's incorrect, who do you reach out to? How do you go about that? So what we're going to first start with is who in the guide industry. First, give you kind of that base knowledge of who everyone is, who we, to our understanding, provides the guide data, so you know who to reach out to. So first of all, the four major data guide providers in the US is Gracenote, formerly TMS, Review Media Services, and they're also owned by Nielsen. You have Simply TV, which they were just recently purchased, the former Red Bee or FYI Television, and that is who provides TitanTV with our baseline data service. Then you have TiVo, also known as Xperi. They're a formerly Rovi company, but they are the original legacy TV guide service. And I did note in here, there are some still email addresses out there that are still being used and are good, that have that schedule.macrovision. So know if you are sending it to that email address, that's actually going to TiVo. And then the last one is TV Media. They're really starting to make some grounds in the US. They're based out of Canada, but they handle some of the US industry as well for guides. So who provides it to who? So in the next couple of slides, we're going to go over who provides it from your cable to your satellite, set-top boxes, PSUP, online guides, smart TVs, even newspapers are still being provided by these four major guide providers. And really, when I look at it, I would say these four probably provide 95 to 99% of all guide data in the US. So with that, let's kick off with cable companies. Again, most of these companies have NDAs, so they're not able to tell us who they actually provide guide data to. Some of this information, again, we have heard through our contacts with local broadcasters that they found out one way or the other. And as this is always, this changes all the time. It could even be up to date as of today, but this is what we know. So for Gracenote, to our understanding, they provide the guide data to the majority of all the North American cable companies. So if it's a major cable company, more than likely go to GraceNote. Then Xperi TiVo, how they explained it was any customer, either it's retail or a cable company, who uses their platform or set-top boxes, it gets their guide data from TiVo. We were recently informed that they also now do provide it to AT&T UFirst. Then you have TV Media. The way they kind of explain it to me is any of the smaller cable companies is who they more than likely provide their guide data to. Now, interesting enough, there are a small portion of cable companies that are actually taking the PSUP, the over-the-air signal guide data, and pulling that in for their guide data for their cable. And then there are still some other ones that I've seen, again, a small amount, that actually pull in the guide data directly from the station. So the station's sending them the guide information, schedules, and then they're putting it into their system. Now, this one is where I think it gets complicated. So I was informed that Spectrum, and if you actually go to their website, it goes over all this details. It's a very informative page on their website as far as what the consumer has. So if it's a consumer that's calling in and they have Spectrum, you might want to find out what kind of guide or even remote that they have, so set-top box. So if it's the Spectrum guide, they are getting it from GraceNote, but if it's the Spectrum iGuide or Passport guide, they are getting it from TiVo, again, to our knowledge. Here's an example of two of the cable guides. A lot of times what we see is a local broadcaster will forward these guides to us and say, consumer said their guide data is wrong. And one of the things that we look at when we get these pictures is, one, if you'll see right away, this one actually came from a Cox cable. The channel numbers here do not have a -1 or a .1, so we know that it's either a cable or satellite, and then there's logos. So that's another example of when somebody would send you a screenshot of a guide, kind of try to determine without asking them where it's coming from. This will give you some good ideas. And here's just another example where this one, I think the numbers must have gotten chopped off, but again, there are different logos here. And this one was provided by Mediacom via viewer. Now let's go off to satellite. To our knowledge, DirecTV gets their guide data directly from GraceNote. Dish Network did get theirs from TiVo, but we were informed end of last year that TiVo no longer provides it. I'm not quite sure who does. It could be GraceNote. But again, here's two examples of the on-screen guides. So what we call EPGs, electronic program guides. Most of them you'll see actually have the Dish logo or the DirecTV logo, but just gives you another example of the guides. And you'll see here on the Direct, there's just channel 18. Where I do see over here on Dish, it does have a dash. So that's something else to kind of see the difference depending on what they have. Now let's talk about over-the-air or OTA. Again, this is the guide data that comes from PSUP in most cases and is inserted into the digital signal. And I will explain here in a few slides why I say in most instances. So first, for those that might not know what PSUP is, it stands for Program and System Information Protocol. This is what the FCC requires that all full power broadcast stations send out in their digital signal so that consumers can then click on their television, and that's the guide data that shows up on it. If you're a visual person like me, I think this graphic gives you a better idea of how that works. So again, it's that program information that gets then inserted into the MUX, also with the audio, the video, all that information gets sent out into your transport to your tower. Then the antenna receiver on the house or the television then pulls it in. And then this is how that guide looks like for a consumer that's receiving over the air. Now, as far as PSUP data providers, TitanTV, we provide over 1,000 broadcast stations with the PSUP data. That equals to about 6,000 distinct channels daily. We do know GraceNote still provides PSUP data to a lot of broadcasters. Then dominantly the PBS stations use their ProTrack by Myers to then produce that PSUP data because, again, that ProTrack is their scheduler, their traffic, and it can output PSUP. We're also aware there are some stations that actually have their own or licensed software that you're utilizing to be able to send out the PSUP. And then a lot of the low powers, because they don't have to do what we call dynamic PSUP, they're just entering that information into the PSUP hardware. It's just going basically as static PSUP. And think of static PSUP, it's just the channel name and the number, right? It's not actually telling you each of the shows. It's just giving you a basic identification of that channel for the consumer to see on their guide. Here's where it gets tricky and gets even more complex. And I think we've seen this more this year than we have in previous years. More of the smart TVs, the newer ones that are connected to the internet, are now getting their on-screen guide data, not from PSUP, over-the-air guide data, but in most cases from a third-party guide data provider. A lot of this is because they want to have a more enriched, enhanced user experience for their EPG. So here's an example of what we call a 1.0 guide on a smart TV. Again, they're receiving it over the air. You will see here you've got the 68.1.2.1. The reason I know right away that this is being enriched is there are logos. Again, with PSUP for 1.0, you cannot send out images over the air. So for this particular television or EPG to get that information, we know that they're getting it from a third party. And a lot of times if you see logos, more than likely then they're also enriching the guide data. Why this is important, a lot of times they will not even look at what's in PSUP. So even if the over-the-air PSUP's correct, what's coming from this third party to enrich this guide isn't. And that's where things get complex. Now let's throw in 3.0 in there. Because ATSC 3.0 or next gen television, you can send out images and logos, show cards. But the thing is, there are still most of the television sets, electronic program guides are not displaying that information at this time, which is frustrating for a lot of broadcasters. So even if they're sending it out, more than likely they're pulling in and they're enriching, overriding that information with information that they receive directly from a third party. But the thing I did want to note is, here's an example of a next gen guide on a television, smart TV, and you'll see it actually has a next gen TV logo. So you'll be able to see some of that in it and you'll have a good idea. And one of the questions that we receive sometimes is, how do I know who provides that guide data for it? A lot of times, if the electronic program guide on the smart TV, you can click on the description page. I've seen up in the right hand corner saying this guide data information provided by so and so. The other thing with that, you also, for over-the-air viewers, is set-top boxes. So many of the set-top boxes do pull in the PSUP or ESG data directly from over the air, and they put it into their EPG. So the guide that consumers are seeing, or they are seeing that directly coming from the station. But there are quite a few of them because when they have a DVR, so again, PSUP for the most part only sends out about 12 to 24 hours of guide data just because of the amount of space they have in the bits. They only send that much information out. So for a DVR to effectively work, they need at least your 7 to 14 days so that the consumer can go look ahead and schedule for different programs to be provided to them. So if it is a set-top box for over the air, you have to then find out, okay, if they're using the DVR, it's not coming from PSUP, who do I need to reach out to? Again, to our knowledge, HDM Home Run and FreeCast gets their guide data from GraceNote, and ZapperBox by BitRouter gets it from TitanTV. Alrighty, so we've talked about OTA, over the air. Now let's talk about over the top. Because there are a lot of over the tops that do have linear programming and they do pull in local broadcast. So the question is, if it is one of those consumers are watching, where do they get the guide data? So you know who to reach out to. This information's generic again, but this will give you kind of an idea of at least where to start. So GraceNote gets the majority of their, they provide majority of the data for the big OTT providers, except for Netflix. Again, with TiVo, if that customer is using the retail or cable consumer electronic company, they are then using the TiVo streaming platform, is then provided by TiVo. To our knowledge, again, YouTube gets their, so YouTube TV gets their information from GraceNote. Sling TV, they were doing a big push for their services that came with a free antenna. So if that consumer is actually using an antenna to get their local channels, then it's coming from the PSUP. But if they are not using the local they're using the antenna to get their local channels, it is then more likely coming from the same place of DirecTV. And then there is also local station apps. So there could be apps that the station is feeding themselves, but also similar to, we do provide some guide data for some of those local broadcast stations apps. Now, this is another one that I wanted to kind of bring up. And again, there's a source here if you want to check out more information. But Roku, again, we had this question from one of our broadcasters. They said, do Roku TVs get their guides from somewhere different than TitanTV? They noted 2 of our viewers with Roku have significantly different guide information. So if you go to this website, it does go into, you can, if you have an HD antenna or you have an antenna that you can connect to your Roku TV, you can actually pull then over the air, get your local live channels over the air, and it's pulling in that program data. What's nice about the Roku app is it then pulls in those live channels and into the Roku guide, and you have a blended guide. So you're getting that guide that's got information for over the air that you're getting from the antenna and then pulling in theirs. But if you're a Roku consumer that's not using an antenna to get your local, then we know that's getting it from a third party. And here's another example of a Roku over-the-top guide. One thing to note, when I was doing some research, a lot of the Roku apps or guides do have these little icons on the side. So that is one way you can tell it's a Roku guide. But this was an example where all these had logos, but this one, to me, then again, you need to go reach out to that who provides guide data to Roku, which I believe at this time is Grace Note. Let's go to online guides. Now, this is not all the online guides out there, because just this week I learned about another one. Was an app. It was actually a company over in UK that does it, and this one consumer in the US has the US version of it. But these are the high level ones that I just wanted to kind of touch base. But if there's other ones that you're aware of that you know that viewers in your area go to quite a bit, let us know so we can add it to here and try to help you find out who actually provides that guide data, so you know who to reach out to if it's incorrect. We have our own consumer site, which is TitanTV.com. And with that, if you are one of our clients, if you just have our piece of our guide, or you have our full MediaStar scheduling tool, when you make a change in MediaStar and you hit publish for those 14 days of data, it will automatically update any guide information on TitanTV.com. And if you also have our local affiliate guide on your website, it would also update that information at the same time. We recently learned that Zap2It no longer has a full guide. Well, when I went to it the other day, it's still going to, I think it's Newsnet. So keep that in mind. There's tvtv.us, gets their guide data from Grace Note. tvguide.com, this was something that I think changed end of last year, beginning this year. They get their guide data from Simply TV/FYI. And actually, it's actually via Fandom. So Fandom's the one that's managing that and providing all the information, but it comes directly from FYI, Simply TV. Then on TV Tonight, this is one that is out of TiVo, or as TiVo provides the guide data. TVPassport.com is owned by TV Media. This is one, if you're unsure if that cable company provides guide data from TV Media, what I suggest is you go to TVPassport.com. If it's correct on there, then you know that it is correct in TV Media. If it's not correct on there and it's matching what this little local cable company is saying, I would then go and reach out to TV Media and let them know, and hopefully then it will update both their website and that cable company. I talked a little bit about local stations' websites. Again, majority have them TitanTV guides on them, next gen. I've seen quite a few Grace Note guides out there still. And then there are also stations build or manage their own guides. So there's a variety of things out there. And then the last one I want to note here is also a website that we own and maintain, which is antennaweb.org. This is where consumers can go to find on what channels they can get free over the air, and that's for 1.0 or 3.0. And on that, it could tell you on the results page, not only the channels, but what's on those channels. And then it has a custom guide for your lineup, so you see what those on. And that's the same thing. It's owned and operated by us. You make a change in MediaStar, it would also update that information there.
We send out our program grids weekly via Excel. How is our data sent to TV guides? Does someone manually enter it?
Yes, so if you're currently emailing your program schedules as an Excel to the 4 guide data providers, then what's happening is, well, I should say in most cases, they are an editor that's viewing it, copying and paste it. Now, I do know there are some of the guide data providers have built some automation in that they can read that Excel spreadsheet and pull it in. But I can't tell you to what extent they're doing that and who's doing it, but I have heard that they're trying to go towards that. But for the majority of it, it is an editor looking at it, verifying what's there, verifying what's in their system, and editing manually.
Okay. Next question is, who manages sub-channel network guides? Our 4.3 has a consistent error. I manually correct every couple of weeks because I don't know who to contact about fixing it.
So really, if it's, okay, so let's say you're in MediaStar and you're constantly making that change, then that's really coming from your Simply TV FYI. Now, let's say you're on tvpassport.com, it's TV Media that's managing that. And that would even be on, let's say, TitanTV.com, and you see your channel's not right on a Cox cable lineup. You're not going to Cox, you're going to Titan TV because that's who's managing that website and providing that guide data. So that's why some of this information we go to, even though it's a pass-through of a network, you go to who's managing that. And if they say, well, that's what I'm getting from the network, then we need to reach out to the network and get that information updated.
There's a couple more questions. One is, do you know how far out Simply TV updates their guides? Does it vary by station and editor? For example, when checking their station for next Sunday, it's wrong. It even shows Modern Family airing, which the station hasn't aired in a year. And another show, Equalizer, which the station has never aired.
Yes, and I'll kind of go into some of that here in a little bit, but what I can tell you is it really depends on the editor, right? On how often they're updating, how far they're updating it. I can tell you in general that the guide data providers basically have a template for each one of your stations. And then it's the editor's responsibility to go in there and update that template. So that's where sometimes if all of a sudden you see a show that you have not seen in years, you've not aired in years, it's because that's on the original template and the editor hasn't got that far ahead to then update it. Now, what a lot of times the good editors will do is update their templates as well when they move forward. But again, there's turnover in editors. So that's a lot of times I know right away if it says a broadcast station says, I haven't aired this forever, I know at that point it's the editor hasn't updated a template and it's just that program that was originally entered in that template. With that, so we're going to go over now why are guides many times inaccurate. So let me touch a little base on some of that. So let's go through the time frame. So again, not only are the guide data providers getting the information directly from your local broadcasters, we also talked about those networks, the diginets. They're also getting it from the content provider. So think of your syndicators. They're sending them out to all the guide data providers. They're getting to their system streaming services. But from the time that you email it to the guide data provider gets it and gets it in their system, update it to where they provide guide data to, it could take 24 to 72 hours. That 72 hours is if you send a change on a Friday at 4, let's say, that editor, or a lot of times their cutoffs, let's say is 3 o'clock Eastern, any change made after that will not get in the overnight process. Well, then the change they make after 4 won't be in there, but maybe it'll be in Saturday. But maybe you send it at 4 o'clock on Friday, they never get to it. They don't get to it till Monday morning. Then it's in Monday's overnight process to get it to where they send. So that's where you get that 24 to 72 hours. And then the other thing that's really interesting is from the time that they get it to where they provide guide data and then how it gets to the consumers could be up to 7 days. The reason that is there are still cable set-top boxes out there in consumers' homes that are really old. And the older ones only update once a week. And the only way to get those out of consumer homes, or that they will get them out of consumer homes, is that the consumer turns it over, it breaks, they're no longer with the service. So keep that in mind related to some of your cable consumers or viewers. It could take that 7 days. And then the other one I want to point out is that if there's an update made today, let's say the president's going to talk tonight, and you want to make sure your over-the-air guide data is correct. If you use our system, you can update it in MediaStar, And then when you publish, it'll automatically update on the FTP site, on the web FTP site. You just need to have your engineer go and manually pull it down or verify that your piece of hardware is looking for changes on a regular basis throughout the day, that it will pull it down. Oh, you've contacted the guide data companies now and you've received no responses. Now what? What can you do? So now what we want to go over is some frequently asked questions and what we recommend are best practices when you send out that guide data, that schedules that you send on a regular basis. We're hoping this will help make things, make it so you have less issues in your guide data, and then help for the editors to be able to see those changes and make them in a timely manner. So the things we're going to go over is, how are you sending them out? Are you highlighting the change? Are you making notes on the changes? Or are you just resending the full schedule and not noting anything? And how many weeks are you sending in your schedule? So first one, we recommend highly that think about every time that you send out your schedule or updates, that it's going to a new editor. The reason we say that is, one, your current editor could go on vacation, could be sick, or is no longer with the company. And now all of a sudden you have a new editor that's filling in or is brand new to your station. They're not familiar with your grids. They're not familiar with your station. They need to start from scratch. So if you just always get in a habit that this schedule is always going to a brand new editor, and how do I need to give them the information? So one, if you do have color on your grids, note in there what the colors mean, so that when someone's looking at it for fresh eyes, what does yellow mean? What does blue mean? And maybe they're just internal purposes, but still they're not questioning, am I supposed to be looking at this or not? Include the call letters and channel numbers in the grid. So especially if it's dominantly OTA, even if you don't have to include your cable channel numbers, think of your over-the-air channel numbers. Because a lot of times, again, these guide data providers kind of start with the local over-the-air channels, and then they just point, okay, this cable channel takes the DT1, this one takes the DT1. So you just need to think about for the over-the-air. And then if you send out a schedule and either it also has simulcast on another channel, or that channel is a simulcast of another channel, just make it clear into that. Again, the idea that the editor looking at this is a brand new editor at your station and they don't know anything about it. The other thing we wanted to point out, and this is we're starting to see more of this. When you send out your weekly schedules, start with a fresh email. Don't go to a previous email because you have all the email addresses set up there, and change the subject and change the body of the email. What's going to happen is there are some still ticketing systems or software. That original email has a header ID in it. No matter if you change the subject and or body, it still has that same header ID, and it just gets tagged to that previous email. What we recommend is you create a distribution list, and then you just add a distribution list to each email that you send out. Any questions on anything we've already gone over that you want to address? Or
there was a question about getting a copy of the best practices. Again, I don't. Is that included in the handout that we did? And you can find that document on the materials section on the dashboard. You should be able to download that. Can you explain simulcast again?
So think of it as a repeater. So it's KCRG and KFXA, even though I know they're owned by two different companies, they air the exact same thing, but they're two different stations. It's what we call a simulcast. Or sometimes a repeater, that maybe the repeater, it airs everything except for one time a year. So a simulcast is literally just a translator, or it airs the exact same programming on one station and the other. And the reason that's important is then the editor knows, if I update this one, they could actually have it built up in their system. If I update station A, station B will automatically get updated. They don't have to update two stations at the same time, or channels. They're automatically getting updated. Another best practice we have is in the subject line of the email, also include the call letters, include the channel number. So I give two examples here. You decide how you want to do it, but KCRG DT1 or KCRG 9.1. The reason I use this example, they're in our market, so it's easier for me to remember. That's just, again, it's a new editor. How do they know when you just say KCRG? They're going to assume the DT1, but sometimes when they assume, we know what happens. Next, always send a minimum of 3 weeks rolling schedule. There's several reasons for that. First, editors typically will not look further out than 3 weeks. They focus heavily on this week's changes and next, and then if they can get to the 3rd week, they'll do it, right? It doesn't mean you can't send more, but also don't expect them to look further than 3 weeks. And the reason we say 3 weeks and not just 2 weeks is if you're sending it once a week, by the day before you send the next one, they only have basically 1 week of programming, right? And all the online guides show 12 or 14 days of programming. So if you send a 3-week rolling schedule, they'll always have at least that 14 days that the consumers are seeing up to date. Now, let's say one of the things I heard, well, I don't have all the episodic information for the 3rd week. That's fine. If you're just sending the basically, here's the schedule, it's the framework of the schedule, and you don't have the episodic information, that's fine. They can at least look it over and go, okay, there's not any major changes. I should be fine. I'll just wait for those episodic information to come through. Now, if you do send a grid, it could be a PDF that has a grid on it, or it's an Excel spreadsheet. We highly recommend that you highlight the changes from your last report. And this is also why we recommend you only send 3 weeks at a time, because if you're highlighting all your changes and you're sending a 6 weeks, and then the next week you remove all those highlights and you send the next 6 weeks, and you then highlight the new changes, those last 3 weeks, they don't know what those changes were. They're not looking that far ahead. But it is very easy for them then, okay, I need to make sure I focus on Face the Nation because it was changed. I need to update that in my system. And it just makes them quickly, instead of trying to figure out where are the changes and I have to go back and forth, because your eyes will miss something. Now, I do see some stations that will send a list, and maybe sometimes it's because they send their grid schedules on Mondays, and then on Wednesday or Thursday, they have some changes for this weekend. They just send the list. If you do that, we recommend also just include the most recent up-to-date grid, just as a reference. The example sometimes that we see, so you'll see down here, Murdoch Mystery is an hour. Maybe there was actually a program in there that originally went from 6:30 to 7:30. Now that this one's replacing it, the question the editor has is, well, now what's at 7 o'clock to 7:30? Because that's not part of your changes, but that's what was on the schedule you sent to me on Monday. If you just send the up-to-date grid as a reference, then they can go back and look, oh, okay. And they don't have to go back and forth and ask you or just ignore it. This is probably one of the most important things to remember. When you're sending your schedules out, make sure you're sending it to these 4 email addresses. We have talked to each of the major guide data providers, and they say, and they recommend that all guide schedules need to go to these. Now, if you also have an editor that you have a contact information, include them as well. But the reason that you want to include the actual main ones as well is, again, that editor could be sick, could be out, or no longer there. This way that you know that somebody at that company is seeing it. The other thing that we want to note, do not include on your weekly schedules our customer care at TitanTV.com. If you do that, our customer care sees, oh, it's just a weekly schedule. They just continue to ignore it. And then when you actually send an email that there's an issue we need to address, it gets kind of missed or it gets lost in all those weekly emails that we get. Now, if you send an issue to us, yes, send it to customer care at TitanTV.com. We always recommend you also copy TV editor at FYI Television, and then, yeah, include a grid at that point. And then we can take a look at it, we'll review everything and let you know, but then you're not getting lost in all the other emails of just weekly schedules.
How should a station note that it's a simulcast to the editors?
So if you're sending that Excel spreadsheet, I would just put, I'm gonna use my example again. KCRGT1 is a simulcast to KFXA1, right? You can just put it in there. Or I've also seen some stations do KCRG/ and then the other channel that's a simulcast, and note that these are simulcast. Again, think of it as if it's a brand new person, and how would you explain it to them? Or how would you note it in that document that they know that it's a simulcast? So I would recommend one of those two ways.
Thanks. What about program descriptions? We have an annual paid where the program description lists a doctor that is no longer involved in the program. How do I have that changed?
So related to descriptions, that's where I would send directly to the guide data provider, or I would actually just send to all four. That way they're all aware, even if one has them in their system correct, saying we've made some changes. Can you please update the guide description for this particular show? And I would also include maybe some examples where it's airing next, so that especially on a paid program, they know exactly what that paid program is. So include the title, include the new description, and maybe why you're changing it. With that, guide data providers, majority will not take the exact wording that you provide them for that description. Each one of them have their own policies and procedures based on how they write out descriptions, or they do it in their own language, their own voice. And so they might change a little bit, but they'll keep it basically what you sent to them. Also know most of the guide data is 160 characters as well. So I know that's a question that's come up. So always at least include that. Sometimes they'll request different lengths, but at least if you do the minimum of the 160, you'll get most of it covered.
Is the 3 weeks of rolling schedule a minimum or a maximum?
I would say it's a minimum. I do know some stations will send a month, which is fine. Just note any that changes on the 4th week might not be viewed. So if you always send a month, you're good because you're sending the minimum of 3 weeks. So another one of the frequently asked questions that we get is how long will it update to reflect the online guide? So again, it depends on what the update is from a station or networks. Again, it's going to take that 24 to 72 hours before it updates, and then where they get it out. So, but if it's a TitanTV guide, either it's TitanTV.com or you have our TitanTV Next Gen guide on your website. Once you make that change in MediaStar and you publish, it will automatically update that guide on your website and also TitanTV.com. Related to guides, the next question that we get asked quite a bit is, how do I get my local program show cards, my logos, thumbnails, images updated on the guides across it? Again, make sure if you change your logo for your station, make sure at that point your marketing team is also sending all those new logos out to these 4 guide data providers. Now, they're the same emails except for FYI, they did recommend that you send it to this media content instead of TV editor. You can still send it to TV editor. They'll pass it on to media content, but this just kind of takes away that step. And then with that, you're going to want to know, well, what do I send? I'll get into that. But first, you can also, if you have one of our TitanTV products, we do have a tool that is called our Client Media Manager tool. This is a free tool if you have any products with us for the guides. This allows you to then go in and update that program logo or channel logo or then program images. If you don't have access to this, just reach out again to customer care at TitanTV.com. They'll just need to know who needs access to it. Sometimes we give access just to the marketing team at that station, and then they go in as needed and update the images for any of their local news programs or if any of their channel logos changes. Now your marketing team is going to ask, well, what size graphics do I need to send? What sizes? So these are our tips on as far as best practices related to what they're wanting. Preferred resolution is the 300 ppi, minimum of 72. They prefer a ping preferred logo with a transparent background. The example that I want to point here why it needs to be transparent. So let's say the guide is on a black background and you send a logo that has a white box. That white box looks very odd on that black background. So that's why they wanted a transparent background so that they can still see your logo, but then their background and it just doesn't have this weird white box. Dimensions preferred is a 50 or 500 px by length. And if you're interested, we can also send you a full document that we have received as far as image spec. Now, next question is, what can be done to get the industry guides updated quicker? So this is something that we have have talked about internally quite a bit. We know that, that 48 to 72 hours to get it off to data providers. How can we make that quicker? How can we provide the information to the guide data providers in a more efficient way so that there's less human error and it gets in their system quicker? That's where we went, and we have developed in our MediaStar scheduler and manager tool called direct data reporting. We have worked with each 4 of the data providers. We found out what kind of file format do they want, what fields do they want. Even some of them have wanted it to match it up so that they can do more automation on their end. What this really does is it allows it to really streamline that programming updates, that you get it to the 4 guide data providers quicker, they get in their system quicker with less human error. Now, to note with that, we are live with all 4 of the guide data providers for what we call a direct ingest. So these would be channels that are completely independent. They're not related to a network, or they are the network, like a Daystar or Fun Roads. Those are what we call direct ingest. For affiliates like an ABC, CBS, NBC, we rolled those out to all TV media, and then we're in the process of getting them all up for TiVo and FYI. And then Grace Note, we did some testing for 4 channels in January. They tested it. Now that they know it, they just need to finish updating their systems to be able to then pull that information in. We don't have a timeline of when that will be done. Again, our hope is by end of this year, but it is in the process. And then once all 4 are up, especially Grace Note, we will make sure all of our MediaStar scheduler and manager users have it set up so that they can electronically send it. The nice thing about this as well is you can always see what you had sent to them and the provider. And then if there's ever a question, we can say, okay, FYI, can you look at port ID 4814? This episode was in there. Where was the disconnect? So again, the whole process that we're trying to do here is really streamline those guide updates, try to get over a lot of the human error, have it in the system quicker and faster with more accurate guides. So with that, Chelsea, what other questions do we have?
How do we get the network programming imaging correct on our website? This has been an ongoing issue. So if it's the network show cards.
If it's a TitanTV guide, one of our affiliate guides, what I would do is email our customer care at titantv.com. I would include TV editor at FYI Television on that. Let us know what the network is, what's wrong, and if you can send a copy of that image, that would help. And a lot of times what they'll do, and this is with any guide data provider, because it is network programming, they'll follow up with the network just to confirm, because that's where a lot of times the network changes come from. It's directly from the network to the guide data providers. But I can tell you there are some networks that are slow on getting information to the guide data providers, or just not reliable. And so a lot of times they have to reach out to the networks to get that information once an affiliate tells them. And that's not only just for images, that's also for the schedule.
When is the direct data reporting available to affiliates?
If you have our MediaStar scheduler or manager, it's available today. If you don't have it in your report section, if you want to just email this customer care email address that's on the screen right now, let them know that you're a scheduler or manager user and you'd like to make sure you have DDR. One thing we do want to know is, let's say you have 5 diginets. Do you only send schedules for your DT1 and 2? You don't need to send them through what we call your pass-through channels, right? You only need to send reports through DDR that you have local or independent programming on it. So just let them know what channels need to have DDR.
This one is also related to direct data reporting. Basically, the question is, we should go ahead and send it electronically to the 3 providers that we already have available. And then when Grace Note is available, you'll see an additional checkbox. So I just wanted to make sure that that one was clear, that once we are live with Grace Note officially with all the affiliates, you'll just see an additional checkbox there that you can send it to all 4 at one time. Is there a day and time you recommend sending schedules out?
So what I would recommend, is really send maybe a Monday, Tuesday to send your schedules out. Then if you have weekend updates, because we know some of the networks don't get all the changes out for that coming weekend, maybe send them I've seen some Wednesday, Thursday, or even a Friday if it's last minute. I would avoid as much not sending schedules, your full schedules on Fridays, because a lot of the editors, that's what they're doing. They're updating and making sure those weekend programs are up to date, and your weekly schedules might get lost in all of that shuffle. So I highly recommend, I would say Monday through Wednesday to send your full, 3+ weeks of programming. And if you need to send any last minute changes, you can send those, I would say Wednesday through Friday.
How do we update info in Titan TV for sporting events? Not just generic MLB baseball, but more specific info like Braves versus Phillies.
So we do have what we call our sports widget. And that's one I would highly recommend you set up a training, and we can walk you through that. But that would be one way to easily find that game. The other thing is, a lot of times you'll go into, in our system and with FYI, the games come in under episodes. So if it is a MLB game, you make sure that that's the name of the program. Then you go into the episode library for MLB. You find those teams, and then that's how it's added. Now, there are some cases that you're scheduling further enough out that those games aren't listed there. What we recommend is you then go to the title branding and add it as a suffix. So it would be then Braves versus Phillies, so that it's at least showing up in any of the reports that you're sending out. And then when it does get updated into our system, many times it automatically updates onto that program in MediaStar.
This one, again, related to the DDR, would it be redundant to send through DDR as well as through PDF, as that's what we're currently doing?
I would say for now, yes, but I would say once we get all 4 up, I would say you would only need to send it to DDR, partly because then the editors know the only way they're going to get it is through DDR and to look at that. So I would say until you get all 4, because you still have to send it to the one, go ahead and do that. But then if you're still seeing issues that things aren't being updated as quickly as they should, and you are sending through DDR, please let us know. There could be something that's not right, or we'll just verify that the editor is checking it and updating properly.
I would also add on to that the one of the major benefits of the direct data reporting is to get the information to the data providers more quickly. So without them looking at a PDF version and then entering it into their system, it just takes a little bit more time. So again, there's benefits to using the DDR versus the PDF, but at this time, you're going to want to keep sending the PDF as well, just because you probably already have a distribution list that's set up to include all of those data providers. You don't need to remove anyone at this point. Just keep everyone listed there. And then once we get everyone live and loaded, then we can stop sending emails, which who doesn't want one less email in their inbox?
Amen.
Is there a maximum number of weeks I should be reporting?
My personal opinion, I wouldn't go more than 4 weeks. Again, they're not looking that far out. I say that, but there might be one of the providers that's requesting more than that, then send more than that. But you also need to know in the back of your head that majority of them are not looking past 3 weeks. So if you're noting changes in that week 4 through 6, they're not seeing them majority of the time. So you just, as long as you're aware of that, you can send that. But I would just recommend a 4-week, but minimum of 3 weeks.
And then here's another question regarding Simply TV. What is their preferred email? Has that changed since they've been since they purchased Red Bee or FYI Television?
So
address that.
Yep. So TV editor FYI Television is still good, and that will be the email that you'll send schedules to going forward. Now, if you have an editor that you've also been including on it, their email will change. And I would just reach out to them directly if you haven't already received a email response saying, hey, here's my new email address. But you will still continue to send it to TV editor FYI Television. That is not changing. There is no plans to that ever to change. And you'll know even when they went from FYI to Red Bee, it's still been the same email. They're going from Red Bee to Simply. FYI, it's still send it to the TV editor at FYItelevision.com.
Here's another question. I really like the reporting. I really like the DDR that you've showcased today. How do I upgrade my MediaStar editor version to seeing that?
Yep. So just reach out to customer care, or if you know who your account rep is, or you can reach out to Chelsea and myself. We'll then get you in contact with your account rep, set up the demo. Because the other thing we want to make sure too, we'd love to get everyone up on it, but maybe it's not a fit. So we want to walk through and make sure that what you're doing, how you're doing things, we want to make it a solution that makes it more efficient and effective for you, which we think it will, but we want to confirm that. And once we've confirmed that, agreed on agreement, and then you're up and going.
Which 3 weeks are data providers looking for? For example, am I sending this past Monday 3 weeks forward, or am I sending next Monday 3 weeks forward?
If you're sending it, so let's say it's Monday, and I would have your schedule. You can even be this Monday forward, right? Because you still want to include this week, right? So because if you had any changes from the last time you sent that report, it should be included in there. And they're going to look at that first week anyways and make sure, okay, is everything up to date this week? Yep, it looks good. Now I'll go to the next week. So maybe your schedules, you send them out on Monday, but they go at Tuesday to Monday, right? I've seen some go Wednesday to Tuesday. I would always include that week, whatever week you're sending it, and then the 2 additional weeks after that.
ComScore gets their data from Redbee. How far in advance does ComScore need that data so overnights show the correct titles?
So that goes back to that 24 to 72 hours. So if it's a Monday and the changes on Wednesday, if you get it to early enough on Monday, it should be in there to ComScore for that Wednesday. Now, if it's a Friday and you're sending it for Monday, it's got to be really early, or that Saturday, it's got to be earlier in the day. Maybe even make it, hey, this is an update that needs to be done, so be sent to ComScore tonight. Because just like TitanTV, ComScore gets a nightly data process from FYI, Redbee, that they then use for those overnights.
Is there a way to look back 2 weeks in the past to make sure a program was titled correctly so that it appears in ComScore correctly?
In the past?
They want to see further than the 5 days that ComScore provides.
So if you are a ComScore only or editor, you can only see 5 days, but you can in the ComScore report. So where you go to click and then hit send, right below that is actually a copy of all the reports that you sent to ComScore. So just look at the date that you want it to say, okay, did I send that change in there? And you can look and see that it was in there or not. That's what I go to if someone emails me and says, hey, did this get sent to ComScore? I'm going directly to those reports that are on that account, looking and to see if that particular program was included when the as run was sent through MediaStar to ComScore.
If I publish my changes on the TitanTV MediaStar, do I need to send changes? I made to the other providers, either via email or direct data reporting.
Yes. So since when any change is made in MediaStar and you publish, it really only goes to any of the products or services that we provide. So again, you publish in MediaStar, it updates TitanTV.com, Attend a Web, guide data services that we provide, and a guide on your website. You need to then also send an email or through DDR to the 4 data providers, because now they need to know about that change as well. And that's another thing that, again, our goal with the DDR is to make it more efficient to be able to then let them know about that change.
Can you make TFN program changes for ComScore? I believe this is a user that has has editor version only.
So with MediaStar Editor, no, you can't. If you see something in MediaStar Editor ComScore only that is until further notice, again, email that customer care at TitanTV.com, copy TV editor at FYI Television. Let them know that this show is at this time on this date is changed to this until further notice. And then our team will make sure that FYI gets it updated, and we'll follow up with them until it is. Well, again, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for all the questions. As we stated before, there is a document that was here. We will also send that best practices document out when we send an email to the link of a copy of this webinar. If you have any other questions or would like to set up a one-on-one to go over this, or maybe you want to share this with your station or your group and you want Chelsea and I to come on and do that, answer questions, we can do that as well. But again, please email customercare@titantv.com for anything that we can assist you with. Otherwise, have a great day, everyone. Thanks again.